Hello and happy Monday. Happy back to Class A. And I hope you're having such a wonderful day. Today we get back into our Éliphas Lévi Transcendental Magic. And today is going to be an extra fun one because today we're going to learn about spirits of the dead. So if that's something that's been interesting you, that you've been curious about, then you're gonna be in for a real treat. And I'm just getting my sound check squared away real quick before we go ahead and get into it. You know what? I probably should have gone and used the restroom before I hit the live button, but it's all right. I'll make it. Sometimes I get myself real good though. Protea Seer of Eons, what's up? Welcome in. Let's rock. Yeah, for sure. I'm ready to rock. I'm assuming my sound's working. I mean, it's been pretty steady. Sometimes you accidentally hit the mute button, or every once in a while, I don't know, it's like it's not set up right, but you guys know I like to make certain, and I'm certain it's working now, so that's what's up. All right, then, everybody, this is Jay Baldeo, and yes, as I said already, we're getting back into Transcendental Magic, Class A. And this one is going to be fun. Let's do a little, I'm just getting this music pulled up, and then let's do a tarot pull, and then we'll get into it. Okay, I think we're all good to go. So let's bust out these cards and see what our Monday message is. Welcome in, everybody, just coming in. What our necromancy message is. Since this particular chapter is all about necromancy. Both sections. I mean, that's how it's been for all of them, really, where the Doctrine and Ritual have been about the same thing. So you guys probably already figured that out. Maybe not. Maybe today's your first day hopping along this channel, so welcome. And you're going to learn soon enough. All right, Book of Thoth. What do we want to know as we study into the wicked and oh so serious art of necromancy from the teachings and practices of transcendental magic, ceremonial magic, high magic? Because I guess depending on how you're using necromancy, it could certainly fall in the category of high magic, but I get that some people have a little bit different definition of that than others. But over here, it's best that we think of it as those things that take you Godward versus those things that keep you trapped in the matrix. All right, that's a good shuffle. Cut the deck, and that's the card there. Well, it's going to be the death card if we're studying necromancy. That's my guess. Anybody else got a guess? Proteus, you got a guess on what the card is today? Death card, or it's a cups that's got Scorpio in it. Those are my two guesses. And then let's see. Ahmad Newman says, this Satan comes to me every night to F him. Like he wants you to do that to him. Satan's trying to lure you in and seduce you. And Fish Dog, what's up, man? Long time no see indeed. I hope all is well in your world and that you're having a good start to your week. All right, Proteus says cups also. Let's take a look. Dang, well, that's a pretty good card to pull for a necromancy study. So we got the Hanged Man. That's a really good card to pull on a necromancy study. Ma'am, water. So that's kind of like cups. Oh, heck yeah, Fish Dog. That's what's up. Good for you. That's really awesome. Good work, Fish Dog. All right, then. So water. So in that sense, cups or even death being Scorpio kind of has a watery theme to it. So we got that's like I've said before, when you do the clairvoyance thing, it's good to note those ways in which you're maybe still kind of right, or else you're just completely wrong too. But correspondences, and that's why. So the card of water, the card that connects Hold to Gibura, at least in the Golden Dawn system. And the Hanged Man is a card that not only kind of symbolizes sacrifice, but to a certain extent could symbolize some of what we'll learn within this necromancy study, because he's tied in on divinity. You can see his foot there, how he's got the one foot that's hanging the rest of him. And that is locked in by an ankh, and the rope also kind of looks like a snake. But then down low, where his mind, how it kind of looks like his mind is projecting almost in like the computer program type of way, the matrix way, like when everything's stripped away and it's just basically a grid. Well, that's what the bed he's on looks like, but also the way that those beams are also projecting another stake, or another snake, excuse me. So it's like either way, he's really locked in on that divine thing, on that serpent of wisdom, on that male, female aspect of creation. All right. Well, that's going to be a really good one for us on this particular study, because as the few people I know who very seriously pursue necromancy and the necromantic arts have stressed to me, you really need to have your crap together, your stuff together, your life together, if you're going to seriously pursue and spend a lot of time doing this particular type of magic. But we're about to see what Éliphas Lévi has got to say about all that. So let me get a little water and let's do it. All right, chapter 13. Mem. Ooh, nice. So this one he has as the Hebrew letter Mem too. So right off the rip, we got no coincidence. And then he has the English letter for N though. And there's a note that says 13 is the number of death and birth, of prophecy and inheritance, of association and the family, of war and treaties, from Le Clef de Grand Mystery. And whatever one, what's up, welcome in, says magic, show me some. You just missed it. We just did the tarot pull. You'll have to go back and watch the replay. All right, necromancy, ex ipsis mors. We have said that the images of persons and things are preserved in the astral light. Therein also can be evoked the forms of those who are in our world no longer. And by this means are accomplished those mysteries of necromancy which are so contested and at the same time so real. One true goddess, great to see you. Welcome in, just in time. All right, and there's a note on that that says, according to La Science des Espirits, necromancy is horrible and constitutes a crime against nature. The Kabbalists who have discoursed concerning the world of spirits have described simply what they have seen in their evocations. Éliphas Lévi Zahed, who writes in this book, has evoked and he has seen. Let us state in the first place what the masters have written on their visions or intuitions in that which they term the light of glory. We read in the Hebrew book concerning the revolution of souls that there are three classes of souls: the daughters of Adam, the daughters of angels, and the daughters of sin. According to the same work, there are also three kinds of spirits: captive, wandering, and free. Souls are sent forth in couples. At the same time, certain souls of men are born widowed, for their spouses are held captive by Lilith and Nehemiah, queens of the Strigas. That's it. That's right. Strigas. Okay. So see right there, star seed type. He says that souls are sent forth in couples, or not star seed type, twin flame, excuse me, twin flame type. Souls are sent forth in couples, according to Lévi. Okay, and he says they are souls condemned to expiate the temerity of a celibate's vow. So that's the ones that are certain souls. At the same time, certain souls of men are born widowed, for their spouses are held captive by Lilith and Namal, queens of the Strigas. They are souls condemned to expiate the temerity of a celibate's vow. Hence, when a man renounces the love of women from his infancy, or maybe even later in his life, he decides that he's going to do the celibate thing, he makes the bride who was destined for him a slave to the demons of debauch. Souls grow and multiply in heaven as bodies do upon earth. Immaculate souls are the daughters of the kisses of angels. Nothing can enter heaven save that which comes from heaven. Hence, after death, the divine spirit which animated man ascends by itself above, leaves two corpses below, one upon earth, the other in the atmosphere, one terrestrial and elementary, the other aerial and sidereal, one already inert, the other still animated by the universal movement of the soul of the world, yet destined to die slowly, absorbed by the astral forces which produced it. The terrestrial body is visible, the other is unseen by the eyes of earthly and living bodies, nor can it be beheld except by the application of the astral light to the translucid, which conveys its impressions to the nervous system and thus influences the organ of sight, so that it perceives the forms which are preserved and the words which are written in the book of vital light. When a man has lived well, the astral body evaporates like a pure incense ascending towards the superior regions. But should he have lived in sin, his astral body, which holds him prisoner, still seeks the object of its passions and wishes to return to life. It torments the dreams of young girls, bathes in the steam of spilt blood, and floats about the places where the pleasures of its life elapsed. It watches over treasures which it possessed and buried. It expends itself in painful efforts to make fresh material organs and so live again. But the stars draw it up and absorb it. It feels its intelligence weaken, its memory gradually vanishes, all its being dissolves. Its former vices rise up before it, assume monstrous shapes, and pursue it. They attack and devour it. The unfortunate creature thus loses successively all the members which have ministered to his iniquities. Then he dies a second time and forever, because he loses his personality and his memory. Souls which are destined to live but are not yet purified completely remain captive for a longer or shorter period in the astral body, wherein they are burned by the odic light which seeks to absorb and dissolve them. It is in order to escape from this body that suffering souls sometimes enter the organisms of the living and dwell therein in that state which Kabbalists term embryonic. Now, it is these aerial bodies which are evoked by necromancy. We enter into communion with larvae, with dead or perishing substances by this operation. The beings in question, for the most part, cannot speak except by a ringing in our ears produced by the nervous shock to which I have referred, and commonly they can reason only by reflecting our thoughts and our reveries. To behold these strange forms, we must put ourselves in an abnormal condition akin to sleep or death. In other words, we must magnetize ourselves and enter into a kind of lucid and waking somnambulism. Then necromancy has real results, and the evocations of magic can produce actual visions. We have said that in the great magical agent, which is the astral light, there are preserved all impressions of things, all images formed either by rays or reflections. In this same light, our dreams come to us. It is this which befools the insane and misguides their dormant judgment in pursuit of the most bizarre phantoms. To ensure vision without illusion in such light, a powerful will must help us to isolate reflections and attract rays only. To dream awake is to see in the astral light. And the orgies of the Sabbath, described by so many sorcerers in their criminal trials, came to them solely in this manner. The preparations and the substances used to obtain this result were often horrible, as we shall see in the ritual. But the result itself was never doubtful. They saw, they heard, they handled the most abominable, most fantastic, most impossible things. And he has a note saying, Black magic is the occult continuation of prescribed rites belonging to the ancient world. Immolation is the basis of the mysteries of nigromancy. Why has he got to say it like that? That means black magic. And bewitchments are, which doesn't really make it any better. And bewitchments are magical sacrifices where the magnetism of evil is substituted for stake and knife. In religion, it is faith which saves. In black magic, it is faith which kills. Black magic is the religion of death, Le Grand Arcane. And so, yeah, we'll get into the chapter this week. We should, I believe, on the one on black magic as well. But he's got a little bit about that here and now. All right, we shall return to this subject in our 15th chapter. At the present moment, we are concerned only with evocation of the dead. In the spring of the year 1854, I had undertaken a journey to London, that I might escape from internal disquietude and devote myself without interruption to science. I had letters of introduction to persons of eminence who were anxious for revelations from the supernatural world. I made the acquaintance of several, and discovered in them, amidst much that was courteous, a depth of indifference or trifling. They asked me forthwith to work wonders as if I were a charlatan. And oh man, didn't we just get that in the chat? And I was somewhat discouraged, for to speak frankly, far from being inclined to initiate others into the mysteries of ceremonial magic, I had shrunk all along from its illusions and weariness. Well, to be fair, we did do a little magic, they just missed it. But right, a lot of people get a very Hollywood type of idea about the way magic works. And let's just say, for the most part, it doesn't. Or if it's going to work in that way, it's going to take somebody really skilled, and also skilled enough to know I'm probably not going to show this to just any old Joe Schmo. All right. Moreover, such ceremonies necessitated an equipment which would be expensive and hard to collect. I buried myself, therefore, in the study of the transcendent Kabbalah, and troubled no further about English adepts. When returning one day to my hotel, I found a note awaiting me. This note contained half of a card divided transversely, on which I recognized at once the seal of Solomon. It was accompanied by a small sheet of paper on which these words were penciled. Tomorrow, at 3 o'clock, in front of Westminster Abbey, the second half of this card will be given to you. That'd be, oh man, talk about a fun adventure. No phones, no nothing in this time except for just moving around the earth, and then you show up and there's a half a letter. Oh man, that sounds like an adventure. All right. I kept this curious assignation. At the appointed spot, I found a carriage drawn up, and as I held unaffectedly the fragment of card in my hand, a footman approached, making a sign as he did so, and then opened the door of the equipage. It contained a lady in black, wearing a thick veil. She motioned to me to take a seat beside her, showing me at the same time the other half of the card. The door closed, the carriage drove off, and the lady raising her veil, I saw that my appointment was with an elderly person, having gray eyebrows and black eyes of unusual brilliance, strangely fixed in expression. Sir, she began with a strongly marked English accent, I am aware that the law of secrecy is rigorous amongst adepts. A friend of Sir B.L., who has seen you, knows that you have been asked for phenomena, and that you have refused to gratify such curiosity. You are possibly without the materials. I should like to show you a complete magical cabinet, but I must exact beforehand the most inviolable silence. If you will not give me this pledge upon your honor, I shall give orders for you to be driven to your hotel. I made the required promise and kept it faithfully by not divulging the name, position, or abode of this lady. whom I soon recognized as an initiate, not exactly of the first order, but still of a most exalted grade. We had a number of long conversations, in the course of which she insisted always upon the necessity of practical experience to complete initiation. She showed me a collection of magical vestments and instruments, lent me some rare books which I needed. In short, she determined me to attempt at her house the experiment of a complete evocation, for which I prepared during a period of 21 days, scrupulously observing the rules laid down in the 13th chapter of the ritual. The preliminaries terminated on 24th July. It was proposed to evoke the phantom of the divine Apollonius and interrogate it upon two secrets, one which concerned myself and one which interested the lady. She had counted on taking part in the evocation with a trustworthy person who, however, proved nervous at the last moment, and as the triad or unity is indispensable for magical rites, I was left to my own resources. The cabinet prepared for the evocation was situated in a turret. It contained four concave mirrors and a species of altar having a white marble top encircled by a chain of magnetized iron. The sign of the pentagram, as given in the fifth chapter of this work, was graven and gilded on the white marble surface. It was inscribed also in various colors upon a new white lambskin stretched beneath the altar. In the middle of the marble table there was a small copper chafing dish containing charcoal of alder and laurel wood. Another chafing dish was set before me on a tripod. I was clothed in a white garment, very similar to the alb of our Catholic priests, but longer and wider, and I wore upon my head a crown of vervain leaves intertwined with a golden chain. I held a new sword in one hand, and in the other the ritual. I kindled two fires with the requisite prepared substances, and began reading the evocations of the ritual in a voice at first low, but rising by degrees. The smoke spread, the flame caused the objects upon it which it fell to waver. Then it went out, the smoke still floating white and slow about the marble altar. I seemed to feel a quaking of the earth, my ears tingled, my heart beat quickly. I heaped more twigs and perfumes on the chafing dishes, and as the flame again burst up, I beheld distinctly, before the altar, the figure of a man of more than a normal size, which dissolved and vanished away. I recommenced the evocations and placed myself within a circle, which I had drawn previously between the tripod and the altar. Thereupon the mirror which was behind the altar seemed to brighten in its depth. A wan form was outlined therein, which increased and seemed to approach by degrees. Three times, and with closed eyes, I invoked Apollonius. When I again looked forth, there was a man in front of me, wrapped from head to foot in a species of shroud which seemed more gray than white. He was lean, melancholy, and beardless, and did not altogether correspond to my preconceived notion of Apollonius. I experienced an abnormally cold sensation, and when I endeavored to question the phantom, I could not articulate a syllable. I therefore placed my hand upon the sign of the pentagram and pointed the sword at the figure, commanding it mentally to obey and not alarm me in virtue of the said sign. The form thereupon became vague and suddenly disappeared. I directed it to return, and presently felt, as it were, a breath close behind me. Something touched my hand, which was holding the sword, and the arm became immediately benumbed as far as the elbow. I divined that the sword displeased the spirit, and I therefore placed it point downwards close by me within the circle. The human figure reappeared immediately, but I experienced such an intense weakness in all my limbs, and a swooning sensation came so quickly over me, that I made two steps to sit down, whereupon I fell into a profound lethargy accompanied by dreams, of which I had only a confused recollection when I came again to myself. For several subsequent days my arm remained benumbed and painful. The apparition did not speak to me, but it seemed that the questions I had designed to ask answered themselves in my mind. To that of the lady, an interior voice replied, "Death." It was concerning a man about whom she desired information. As for myself, I sought to know whether reconciliation and forgiveness were possible between two persons who occupied my thoughts, and the same inexorable echo within me answered, "Dead." I am stating facts as they occurred, but I would impose faith on no one. The consequence of this experience on myself must be called inexplicable. I was no longer the same man. Something of another world had passed into me. I was no longer either sad or cheerful, but I felt a singular attraction towards death. Unaccompanied, however, by any suicidal tendency, I analyzed my experience carefully, and notwithstanding a lively nervous repugnance, I repeated the same experiment on two further occasions, allowing some days to elapse between each. There was not, however, sufficient difference between the phenomena to warrant me in protracting a narrative which is perhaps already too long. But the net result of these two additional evocations was for me the revelation of two Kabbalistic secrets which might change in a short space of time the foundations and laws of society at large, if they came to be known generally. Am I to conclude from all this that I really evoked, saw, and touched the great Apollonius of Tyana? I am not so hallucinated as to affirm, or so unserious as to believe it. The effect of the preparations, the perfumes, the mirrors, the panticles, is an actual drunkenness of the imagination, which must act powerfully upon a person otherwise nervous and impressionable. I do not explain the physical laws by which I saw and touched. I affirm solely that I did see and that I did touch, that I saw clearly and distinctly, apart from dreaming, and this is sufficient to establish the real efficacy of magical ceremonies. For the rest, I regard the practice as destructive and dangerous. If it became habitual, neither moral nor physical health would be able to withstand it. The elderly lady whom I have mentioned, and of whom I had reason to complain subsequently, was a case in point. Despite her asseverations to the contrary, I have no doubt that she was addicted to necromancy and Goetia. At times she talked complete nonsense, at others yielded to senseless fits of passion for which it was difficult to discover a cause. I left London without bidding her adieu, and I adhere faithfully to my engagement by giving no clue to her identity, which might connect her name with practices pursued in all probability without the knowledge of her family, which I believe to be numerous and of very honorable position. There are evocations of intelligence, evocations of love, and evocations of hate. But once more, there is no proof whatsoever that spirits leave the higher spheres to communicate with us. The opposite, as a fact, is more probable. We evoke the memories which they have left in the astral light or common reservoir of universal magnetism. It was in this light that the Emperor Julian once saw the gods manifest, looking old, ill, and decrepit. A fresh proof of the influence exercised by current and accredited opinions on the reflections of this same magical agent, which makes our tables talk and answers by taps on the walls. After the evocation I have described, I reread carefully the life of Apollonius, who is represented by historians as an ideal of antique beauty and elegance. And I remarked that towards the end of his life he was starved and tortured in prison. This circumstance, which remained perhaps in my memory without my being aware of it, may have determined the unattractive form of my vision, the latter regarded solely as the voluntary dream of a waking man. So that right there is a good statement and indicator as to how that subconscious mind will work. So even though we might read a lot of things and only retain a certain amount, the subconscious takes it all in. And so what he's saying is that now, after further reviewing that historical account of Apollonius, that it makes more sense why it appeared in this kind of more undesirable way, or unattractive, the way he puts it, as opposed to like this, I don't know, beautiful looking type of man. Okay, let's see. I have seen two other persons, whom there is no occasion to name, both differing as regards costume and appearance from what I had expected. For the rest, I commend the greatest caution to all who propose undertaking similar experiences. Their result is intense exhaustion and frequently a shock sufficient to occasion illness. I must not conclude this chapter without mentioning the curious opinions of certain Kabbalists who distinguish between apparent and real death, holding that the two are seldom simultaneous. In their view, the majority of persons who are buried are still alive, while a number of others who are regarded as living are in reality dead. Incurable madness, for example, would be with them an incomplete but real death, leaving the earthly form under the purely instinctive control of the sidereal body. When the human soul suffers a greater strain than it can bear, it would thus become separated from the body, leaving the animal soul or sidereal body in its place, and these human remains would be less alive, in a sense, than a mere animal. Dead persons of this kind are said to be identified by the complete extinction of the moral and affectionate sense. They are neither bad nor good. They are dead. Such beings who are poisonous fungi to the human race, or excuse me, of the human race, absorb the life of living beings to their fullest possible extent. And this is why their proximity depletes the soul and chills the heart. If such corpse-like creatures really existed, they would stand for all that was recounted in former times about brucolax and vampires, which I'm pretty sure by brucolax he means like zombies, walking corpses. Now, are there not certain persons in whose presence one feels less intelligent, less good, sometimes even less honest? Are there not some whose vicinity extinguishes all faith and all enthusiasm, who draw you by your weaknesses, who govern you by your evil propensities, and make you die slowly to morality in a torment like that of Mezentius? These are dead people whom we mistake for living beings. These are vampires whom we regard as friends. Spooky. Well, we've all encountered some people that have that certain degree of qualia to them. Some worse than others, I suppose. And a lot of people, I think, probably do it more unconsciously. But you do get those few and far between who are just, oh, unpleasant as can be. All right, so that does it for the doctrine part. I'm going to take a little more water and then we'll get into the ritual. So, chapter 13, the ritual, necromancy. We have declared boldly our opinion, or rather our conviction, as to the possibility of resurrection in certain cases. It remains for us now to complete the revelation of this arcanum and to expose its practice. Death is a phantom of ignorance. It does not exist. Everything in nature is living, and it is because it is alive that everything is in motion and undergoes incessant change of form. Old age is the beginning of regeneration. It is the labor of renewing life, and the ancients repressed the mystery we term death by the fountain of youth, which was entered in decrepitude and left in new childhood. The body is a garment of the soul. When this garment is worn out completely or seriously and irreparably rent, it is adorned and it is abandoned and never rejoined. But when it is removed by some accident without being worn out or destroyed, it can, in certain cases, be reassumed, either by our own efforts or by the assistance of a stronger and more active will than ours. Death is neither the end of life nor the beginning of immortality. It is the continuation and transformation of life. And a note says, life is eternal. Death, being ideologically the negation of life, can be only apparent and transitory. Transitory death is but a phenomenon of eternal life, analogous to that of sleeping or waking. From La Liva de Sages. Now, a transformation being always a progress, few of those who are apparently dead will consent to return to life, that is, to take up the vestment which they have left behind. It is this which makes resurrection one of the hardest works of the highest initiation, and hence its success is never infallible, but must be regarded almost invariably as accidental and unexpected. To raise up a dead person, we must rivet suddenly and energetically the most powerful chains of attraction which connect it with the body that it has just quitted. It is therefore necessary to be acquainted previously with this chain, then to seize thereon, finally to project an effort of will sufficiently powerful to link it up instantaneously and irresistibly. All this, as we say, is extremely difficult, but is in no sense absolutely impossible. The prejudices of materialistic science exclude resurrection at present from the natural order of things, and hence there is a disposition to explain all phenomena of this class by lethargies, more or less complicated with signs of death and more or less long in duration. If Lazarus rose again before our doctors, they would record in their memorials to official academies a strange case of lethargy, accompanied by an apparent beginning of putrefaction and a strong corpse like odor. The exceptional occurrence would be labeled with a suitable name, and the matter would be at an end. We have no wish to alarm anyone, and if, out of respect for men with diplomas who represent orthodox science, it is requisite to term our theories concerning resurrection the art of curing exceptional and aggravated trances, nothing, I hope, will hinder us from making such a concession. But if ever a resurrection has taken place in the world, it is incontestable that resurrection is possible. Now, the bodies corporate protect religion, and religion asserts positively the fact of resurrections. Therefore, resurrections are possible. From this, escape is difficult. And then there's a note that says the reader will do well to observe this luminous syllogism as an example of the logic belonging to universal science and a discoverer of the absolute in France of the Second Empire. It is otherwise a test of values for Lévi's occult sanctuary, not because he really thought that from this escape is difficult, but because he knew well enough that he had taken out a license in mockery. To say that such things are possible outside the laws of nature and by an influence contrary to universal harmony is to affirm that the spirit of disorder, darkness, and death can be sovereign arbiter of life. Let us not dispute with worshippers of the devil, but pass on. It is not religion alone which attests the facts of resurrection. We have collected a number of cases. An occurrence which impressed the imagination of Groots, the painter, has been reproduced by him in one of his most remarkable pictures. An unworthy son, present at his father's deathbed, seizes and destroys a will unfavorable to him. The father rallies, leaps up, curses his son, and then drops back dead a second time. An analogous and more recent fact has been certified to ourselves by ocular witnesses. A friend, betraying the confidence of one who had just died, tore up a trust deed he had signed, whereupon the dead person rose up and lived to defend the rights of his chosen heirs, which this false friend sought to set aside. The guilty person went mad, and the risen man compassionately allowed him a pension. When the Savior raised up the daughter of Jairus, he was alone with three faithful and favored disciples. He dismissed the noisy mourners, saying, "The girl is not dead, but sleeping." Then, in the presence only of the Father, Mother, and three disciples, that is to say, in a perfect circle of confidence and desire, he took the child's hand, drew her suddenly up, and cried to her, "Young girl, I say to thee, arise." The undecided soul, doubtless in the immediate vicinity of the body, and possibly regretting its extreme youth and beauty, was surprised by the accents of that voice which was heard by her father and mother. Trembling with hope, and on their knees, it returned into the body. The maiden opened her eyes, rose up, and the master commanded immediately that food should be given her, so that the function of life might begin a new cycle of absorption and regeneration. The history of Eliseus raising up the daughter of the Shunammite, and of St. Paul raising Eutychus are facts of the same order. The resurrection of Dorcas by St. Peter, narrated so simply in the Acts of the Apostles, is also a history the truth of which it is difficult to dispute with reason. Apollonius of Tyana seems to have accomplished similar miracles, while we ourselves have been the witness of facts which are not wanting in analogy with these. But the spirit of the century in which we live imposes in this respect the most careful reserve upon us, the thaumaturge being liable to a very indifferent reception at the hands of a discerning public, all which does not hinder the earth from revolving, or Galileo from having been a great man. Josue Yara, what's up? Welcome. I hope you're having a good day. And then let's see, Protea, sorry, I missed that chat of yours. He asked, do you think that coffins were invented to keep us from assimilating back with the earth on purpose. Um, well, the original coffins, to my understanding, were not, they didn't really hold up so well. So I don't think so, as much as it was just more part of like a funerary process, the ritual aspect of a funeral. But what I have heard is that nowadays there are definitely certain coffins which are so well made that they just don't decompose the body. Now, whether or not that's an intentional thing to keep us from assimilating back with the earth or not, I certainly cannot say. I could only speculate on. And I don't know, man. Like with stuff like that, it can be easy to think that there's a lot of like nefarious agenda type of stuff against mankind. And it's not to say that there potentially isn't, but I guess I just try to look at things more glass half full, and to where it's more just like maybe a byproduct of certain coffin makers really getting adept at their own art, and so making these really nice, elaborate, secure coffins, as opposed to like a nefarious thing. But I guess it's hard to say for sure. But hopefully that answers your question a bit. Okay, he says just a thought. Yeah, I mean it's definitely a good thought, and it is a possibility. Um, and it seems like different cultures have also had different kind of ideas on what type of death is best for the soul, and like whether it's cremation, whether it's, I don't know, you know what I mean? Throwing them in a volcano, whatever, all kinds. There's been all kinds of stuff in the history of humanity. And thank you. I appreciate you. All right. So, right here, last down at the end. The resurrection of a dead person is the masterpiece of magnetism because it needs for its accomplishment the exercise of a kind of sympathetic omnipotence. It is possible in the case of death by congestion, by suffocation, by exhaustion, or by hysteria. Eutychus, who was resuscitated by St. Paul after falling from a third story, had doubtless suffered no serious internal injuries, but had succumbed to asphyxia, occasioned by the rush of air during his fall, or alternatively to violent shock and terror. In a parallel case, he who feels conscious of the power and faith necessary for such an achievement must, like the apostle, practice insufflation, mouth to mouth, combined with contact of the extremities for restoration of warmth. Were it simply a matter of what the ignorant call miracle, Elias and St. Paul, who made use of the same procedure, would have spoken in the name of Jehovah or of Christ. It is enough sometimes to take the person by the hand and raise them quickly, summoning them in a loud voice. This procedure, which succeeds frequently in swoons, may even have effect upon the dead. When the magnetizer who exercises it is endowed with powerfully sympathetic speech and possesses what may be called eloquence of tone, he must be also tenderly loved or greatly respected by the person on whom he would operate, and he must perform the work with a great burst of faith and will, which we do not always find ourselves to possess in the first shock of a great sorrow. What is vulgarly called necromancy has nothing in common with resurrection, and it is at least highly doubtful whether, in operations connected with this application of magical power, we really come into correspondence with the souls of the dead whom we evoke. There are two kinds of necromancy, that of light and that of darkness, the evocation by prayer, panticle, and perfumes, and the evocation by blood, imprecations, and sacrilege. We have practiced only the first, and advise no one to devote themselves to the second. It is certain that the images of the dead do appear to the magnetized persons who evoke them. It is certain also that they never reveal any mysteries of the life beyond. They are beheld as they still exist in the memories of those who knew them, and doubtless as their reflections have left them impressed on the astral light. When evoked, specters reply to questions addressed them. It is always by signs or by interior and imaginary impressions, never with a voice which really strikes the ears. It is, and this is comprehensible enough, for how should a shadow speak? With what instrument could it cause the air to vibrate by impressing it in such a manner as to make distinct sounds? At the same time, electrical contacts are experienced from apparitions and sometimes appear to be produced by the hand of a phantom. But the phenomena is wholly subjective, is occasioned solely by the power of imagination and the local wealth of that occult force which we term the astral light. The proof of this is that spirits, or at least the specters pretended to be such may indeed touch us occasionally, but we cannot touch them. And this is one of the most affrightening characteristics of these apparitions, which are at times so real in appearance that we cannot unmoved feel the hand pass through that which seems a body and yet make contact with nothing. We read in ecclesiastical historians that Spiridion, bishop of Tramithante, afterwards invoked as a saint, called up the spirits of his daughter Irene to ascertain from her the whereabouts of some concealed money which she had taken in charge for a traveler. Swedenborg communicated habitually with the so-called dead, whose forms appeared to him in the astral light. Several credible persons of our acquaintance have assured us that they have been revisited for years by the dead who were dear to them. The celebrated atheist Sylvanus Marechal appeared to his widow and one of her friends to acquaint her concerning a sum of 1,500 francs which he had concealed in a secret drawer. This anecdote was related to us by an old friend of the family. Evocation should have always a motive and a justifiable end, otherwise they are works of darkness and folly, most dangerous for health and reason. To evoke out of pure curiosity or to find out whether we shall see anything is to court fruitless fatigue. The transcendental sciences admit of neither doubt nor puerility. The permissible motive of an evocation may be either love or intelligence. Evocations of love require less apparatus and are in every respect easier. The procedure is as follows. We must collect, in the first place, carefully the memorials of him or her whom we desire to behold, the articles he used, and on which his impression remains. We must also prepare an apartment in which the person lived, or otherwise one of similar kind, and place his portrait veiled in white therein, surrounded with his favorite flowers, which must be renewed daily. A fixed date must then be chosen, being that of the person's birth, or one that was especially fortunate for his and our own affection, one of which we may believe that his soul, however blessed elsewhere, cannot lose the remembrance. This must be the day of evocation, and we must prepare for it during the space of 2 weeks. Throughout the period, we must refrain from extending to anyone the same proofs of affection which we have the right to expect from the dead. We must observe strict chastity, live in retreat, and take only one modest and light collation a day. Every evening, at the same hour, we must shut ourselves in a chamber consecrated to the memory of the lamented person, using only one small light, such as that of a funeral lamp or taper. This light should be placed behind us. The portrait should be uncovered, and we should remain before it for an hour in silence. Finally, we should fumigate the apartment with a little good incense and go out backwards. On the morning of the day fixed for the evocation, we should adorn ourselves as if for a festival, not salute anyone first, but and make but a single repast of bread, wine, and roots or fruits. The cloth should be white, two covers should be laid, and one portion of the broken bread should be set aside. A little wine should be placed also in the glass of the person whom we design to invoke. The meal must be eaten alone in the chamber of evocations and in presence of the veiled portrait. It must all it must be all cleared away at the end, except the glass belonging to the dead person, and his portion of bread, which must be set before the portrait. In the evening, at the hour for the regular visit, we must repair in silence to the chamber, light a clear fire of cypress wood, and cast incense 7 times thereon, pronouncing the name of the person whom we desire to behold. The lamp must then be extinguished and the fire permitted to die out. On this day, the portrait must not be unveiled. When the flame dies down, put more incense on the ashes and invoke God according to the forms of that religion to which the dead person belonged, and according to the ideas which he himself possessed of God. While making this prayer, we must identify ourselves with the evoked person, speak as he spoke, believe in a sense as he believed. Then, after a silence of 15 minutes, we must speak to him as if he were present, with affection and with faith, praying him to appear before us. Renew this prayer mentally, covering the face with both hands. Then call him thrice with a loud voice. Remain kneeling, the eyes closed or covered for some minutes. Then call again thrice upon him in a sweet and affectionate tone, and slowly open the eyes. Should nothing result, the same experiment must be renewed in the following year, and if necessary, a third time when it is certain that the desired apparition will be obtained, and the longer it has been delayed, the more realistic and striking it will be. Evocations of knowledge and intelligence are performed with more solemn ceremonies. If concerned with a celebrated personage, we must meditate for 21 days upon his life and writings, form an idea of his appearance, converse with him mentally, and imagine his answers. We must carry his portrait, or at least his name, about us, following a vegetarian diet for 21 days and a severe fast during the last 7. We must next construct the magical oratory described in the 13th chapter of our doctrine and see that all light is excluded therefrom. If, however, the proposed operation is to take place in the daytime, we may leave a narrow aperture on the side where the sun will shine at the hour of evocation. Place a triangular prism before this opening and a crystal globe filled with water facing the prism. If the experiment has been arranged for night, the magical lamp must be so situated that its single ray shall fall upon the altar smoke. The purpose of these preparations is to furnish the magical agents with elements of corporeal appearance, and to ease as much as possible the tension of imagination, which could not be exalted without danger into the absolute illusion of dream. For the rest, it will be understood easily that a beam of sunlight or the ray of a lamp, colored variously and falling upon curling and irregular smoke, can in no way create a perfect image. The chafing dish containing the sacred fire should be in the center of the oratory and the altar of perfumes hard by. The operator must turn towards the east to pray, and the west to invoke. He must be either alone or assisted by 2 persons, preserving the strictest silence. He must wear the magical vestments which we have described in the 7th chapter, and must be crowned with vervain and gold. He should bathe before the operation, and all his undergarments must be of the most intact and scrupulous cleanliness. The ceremony should begin with a prayer suited to the genius of the spirit about to be invoked, and one which would be approved by himself if he still lived. For example, it would be impossible to evoke Voltaire by reciting prayers in the style of Saint Bridget. For the great men of antiquity, we may use the hymns of Cleanthes or Orpheus, with the oath terminating the golden verses of Pythagoras. In our evocation of Apollonius, we used the magical philosophy of Patricius for the ritual, containing the doctrines of Zoroaster and the writings of Hermes Trismegistus. We recited the Noctimeron of Apollonius in Greek with a loud voice and added a conjuration beginning, "Let the father of all be counselor and thrice great Hermes." And Thrice Great Hermes Guide. And then we've got a footnote that says the conjuration referred to is given in Greek by Lévi without translation and without reference to source. It is in such a corrupt state as printed that no rendering is possible except the opening words which I have given in the text above and those of the last paragraph, namely, O Apollonius, O Apollonius, O Apollonius, thou teachest the magic of Zoroaster, follower of Ormuzd, and this is the service of the gods. For the evocation of spirits belonging to religions issued from Judaism, the following Kabbalistic invocation of Solomon should be used, either in Hebrew or in any other tongue with which the spirit in question is known to have been familiar. Powers of the kingdom, be ye under my left foot and in my right hand. glory, and eternity, take me by the two shoulders, and direct me in the paths of victory. Mercy and justice, be ye the equilibrium and splendor of my life. Intelligence and wisdom, crown me. Spirits of Malkut, lead me betwixt the two pillars upon which rests the whole edifice of the temple. Angels of Netzach and Hod, establish me upon the cubic stone of Yesod. O Gedulael, O Geburael, O Tipperet, Benael, be ye my love. Ruach, Hokmael, be thou my light. Be that which thou art, and thou shalt be. O Ketheriel, Ishim, assist me in the name of Shaddai. Cherubim, be my strength in the name of Adonai. Beni Elohim, be my brethren in the name of the Son, and by the powers of Zebaoth. Elohim, do battle for me in the name of Tetragrammaton. Melachim, protect me in the name of Yod He Vav He. Seraphim, cleanse my love in the name of Elvo. Chazmalim, enlighten me with the splendors of the Eloi and Shekinah. Aralim, act. Ophanim, revolve and shine. Hajoth and Kadosh, cry. Speak, roar, and bellow. Kadosh, 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 Shaddai, Adonai, Yotava, Yezeriel. Hallelujah, 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 amen. Some of that font is a little bit challenging to read, but I think that we got it. Okay, almost done. Oh, it should be remembered above all in conjurations that the names of Satan, Beelzebub, Adramelech, and others do not designate spiritual unities, but legions of impure spirits. Our name is Legion, for we are many, says the spirit of darkness in the gospel. Number constitutes law, and progress takes place inversely in hell as the domain of anarchy. That is to say, the most advanced in satanic development, and consequently the most degraded and the least intelligent and feeblest. Thus, a fatal law derives demons downwards when they wish and believe themselves to be ascending. So also those who term themselves chief are the most impotent and despised of all. As to the horde of perverse spirits, they tremble before an unknown, invisible, incomprehensible, capricious, implacable chief, who never explains his laws, whose arm is ever stretched out to strike those who fail to understand him. They give this phantom the names of Baal, Jupiter, and even others more venerable, which cannot, without profanation, be pronounced in hell. But this phantom is only the shadow and remnant of God, disfigured by willful perversity and persisting in imagination, like a visitation of justice and a remorse of truth. When the evoked spirit of light manifests with sad or irritated countenance, we must offer him a moral sacrifice. That is, be inwardly disposed to renounce whatever offends him, and before leaving the oratory, we must dismiss him, saying, May peace be with thee. I have not wished to trouble thee. Do thou torment me not. I shall labor to improve myself as to anything that vexes thee. I pray and will still pray with thee and for thee. Pray thou also both with me and for me, and return to thy great slumber, expecting that day when we shall awake together. Silence and adieu. We must not close this chapter without giving some details on black magic for the benefit of the curious. The practices of the Thessalian sorcerers and Roman Canidias are described by several ancient authors. In the first place, a pit was dug at the mouth of which they cut the throat of a black sheep. The Psyllae and larvae, presumed to be present and swarming around to drink the blood, were driven off with the magic sword. The triple Hecate and the infernal gods were evoked, and the phantom whose apparition was desired was called upon 3 times. In the Middle Ages, necromancers violated tombs, composing philters and unguents with the fat and blood of corpses combined with aconite, belladonna, and poisonous fungi. They boiled and skimmed these frightful compounds over fires fed with human bones and crucifixes stolen from churches. They added dust of dried toads and ash of consecrated hosts. They anointed their temples, hands, and breasts with the infernal unguent, traced diabolical panticles, evoked the dead beneath gibbets or in deserted graveyards. Their howlings were heard from afar, and belated travelers imagined that legions of phantoms rose up out of earth. The very trees in their eyes assumed appalling shapes. Fiery orbs gleamed in the thickets. Frogs in the marshes seemed to echo mysterious words of the Sabbath with croaking voices. It was the magnetism of hallucination and the contagion of madness. The end of procedure in black magic was to disturb reason and produce the feverish excitement which emboldens to great crimes. The grimoires, once seized and burnt by authority everywhere, are certainly not harmless books. Sacrilege, murder, theft are indicated or hinted as means to realization in almost all these works. Thus, in the Grand Grimoire and its modern version, The Red Dragon, there is a recipe entitled Composition of Death or Philosophical Stone, a broth of aquafortis, copper, arsenic, and verdigris. There are also necromantic process comprising the tearing up of earth from graves with the nails, dragging out bones, placing them crosswise on the breast, then assisting at midnight mass on Christmas Eve and flying out of the church at the moment of consecration, crying, "Let the dead rise from their tombs." Thereafter, the procedure involves returning to the graveyard, taking a handful of earth nearest to the coffin, running back to the door of the church, which has been alarmed by the clamor, depositing the two bones crosswise and again shouting, "Let the dead rise from their tombs." If the operator escapes being seized and shut up in a madhouse, he must retire at a slow pace and count 4,500 steps in a straight line, which means following a broad road or scaling walls. Having traversed this space, he lies down upon the earth as if in a coffin and repeats in lugubrious tones, "Let the dead rise from their tombs." Finally, he calls thrice on the person whose apparition is desired. No doubt, anyone who is mad enough and wicked enough to abandon himself to such operations is predisposed to all chimeras and phantoms. Hence, the recipe of the Grand Grimoire is most efficacious, but we advise none of our readers to test it. All right, that does it. That does it for a little study on necromancy. Very cool. Tomorrow will be a quicker one where he's going to talk about some transmutations. And then everybody's favorite on Wednesday, black magic. So that's how it's the Class A's looking for this week. Class B, I'm still working on making a final decision what we're going to do. But when the time comes, well, then it'll be time. So until then, I appreciate you all, though, very much. Many blessings, much love. No problem at all, Proteus, and thank you. I appreciate your presence. I appreciate Josue Yara popping back. Once your goddess popping in. Fish Dog, good to see you again. Ahmad Newman never gave us a solid answer. And whatever one. Go back and check that tarot if you want the magic. All right, everybody. Well, this has been Jay Baldale. This has been Éliphas Lévi's Transcendental Magic. It's Doctrine and Ritual. Bye-bye.